Good morning and welcome to this special shir. Welcome a very nice crowd and certainly worthy for our most esteemed guest, Rabbi Yona Reiss. Rabbi Reiss is someone who does not need introduction to this community, serving as the Av Beistin of our Chicago Rabbinical Council, and a myriad of incredibly important activities he's involved with day to day, regularly, specifically the work he has done to lead this community as well as around the nation during the COVID period, and the amount of crucial shilos that come his way throughout the year from around the Chicago area, the country, and the world. In addition, the shilos that he's fielding and the responsibility that Rabbi Reiss has to the Jewish community during the Erev Pesach, during the pre-Pesach season from Purim to Pesach. And that is that season that we are currently find ourselves within. And this year in particular, we have a very unique set of halachos. Not only managing the regular COVID responsibilities, if you could say such a thing, but also to deal with this in a year that has the unique calendar layout that we have this year. That is Erev Pesach, Shechal BeShabbos, when a Pesach comes on a Motzei Shabbos, and all of the unique halachos that are involved in such a scenario. Who better than to present us with some of those unique halachos and some of the shilos that come up, and the unique halachos that we find ourselves in this year. So, Rabbi Reiss, I want to thank you for making time for us this morning, and for all you do for me, for our community, for our shul, for our community, and for the broader Jewish community. I believe I made you a co-host, and I will also spotlight your video. Bechavod Harav Yona Reiss.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Gelman, and Shavua Tov.
Yes, unmute you. Hold on one second. Rabbi Reiss, I want to see if we could hear you.
Hello, good morning.
Ah, there we go. Good morning.
Okay, Shavua Tov, and thank you very much, Rabbi Gelman. This year is a unique year. I mean, we've been living in unique times for a while, as Rabbi Gelman mentioned, but you can heap upon that, that this is an unusual occurrence of an Erev Pesach, Shechal BeShabbos. When Erev Pesach happens to fall out on Shabbos, so it creates various questions. People don't always remember what to do because it happens so infrequently. Sometimes you'll have a period of 5 or 6 years in which there will be 2 or 3 such occasions, and then you can go 20 years without there being an Erev Pesach Shechal BeShabbos. The last time that we had something like this was actually 13 years ago. The next time is scheduled for 4 years from now, and then it's scheduled to be another 20-year hiatus. Of course, we pray that Mashiach will come beforehand, and we'll be Mekadesh again al pi hariyah. We'll have witnesses that will report when they saw the sighting of the new moon, so that we don't necessarily know for sure exactly how the calendar is going to work out after that occurs. B'meira v'yameinu. The Gemara in Pesachim on Daf Samach Vavam and Aleph at the beginning of Perek Elu Devarim tells us that even in the days of the Tanaim, people were confused. When Erev Pesach would fall out on Shabbos, it tells us the story of the Bnei Beseira, who were the leaders, the governors in the state of Israel. It wasn't the modern day state of Israel, but it was the land of Israel in those days, and it was Erev Pesach Shechal BeShabbos, and they didn't know whether the Korban Pesach, whether the bringing and sacrificing of the Korban Pesach would be Docha Shabbos, would override the Shabbos. So they were told that there was this great Talmid Chacham that came from Bavel. His name was Hillel Habavli. And Hillel Habavli was somebody who learned with Shmaya B'Avtalion, and he would know the answer to this question. So they brought him in, and he said, well, it says the word B'moado when it comes to the bringing of the Korban Pesach in the Sefer Bamidbar, V'yasu B'nei Yisrael es HaPesach B'moado, and we also have the word B'moado in connection with the bringing of the Korban Tamid. Tishmeru Lahakriv Li B'moado. Just like with respect to the Korban Tamid, it's brought even on Shabbos. We know that from the fact that we're told about the Korban, the Korban Musaf of Shabbos, Olas Shabbos b'Shabbato, Al Olas HaTamid v'Niska, that it's brought together with the regular Korban Tamid. So just like we know that the Korban Tamid is Docha Shabbos, based on the word of B'Moado, so too, when it says B'Moado, in connection with the Korban Pesach, it means that it is a Doche Shabbos. Either we're learning from Gzeira Shavua, or we see at the end of the day, which is how the Rambam learns in Hilchos Korban Pesach, that the word B'Moado intrinsically teaches us that it has to be, and in that moed, at that time, the Torah is kovei, the Torah establishes the Korban Pesach must be brought on the 14th day of Nisan. It doesn't matter if it falls out on Shabbos, you would bring it anyway. So the one nafkamina for us in terms of the ramifications nowadays, we don't bring the Korban Pesach, but there is a minhag to read the parshios of the Korban Pesach on the day in which it otherwise would have been brought, based on the principle of unishama farim sefasenu, that when we read about the bringing of a korban, it's on some level considered as if we have actually sacrificed the korban. So in this year, the reading of the Korban Pesach, which is normally done on the mincha time, which is when the Korban Pesach was brought, should be read this year on Erev Pesach, despite the fact that it's on Shabbos. Ideally, since the way the Korban Pesach was brought was that it was brought after the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim, after the mincha offering. Ideally, we should have an early mincha minyan on Erev Pesach on Shabbos, that people can go and they can daven mincha, and then afterwards, since the Korban mincha precedes the Korban Pesach, after you've done that, that's the ideal time to read about the Korban Pesach, to read the special psukim which can be found in many of the Haggadahs. There's also another ramification in terms of the nusach at the Seder and the bracha of Asher Ge'alanu. We speak about how we look forward to the rebuilding of the Beis Mikdash, V'noch Hasham, min hazvachim and min hapsachim, that we're going to then eat again from the zvachim and the psachim. What's the zvachim? The psachim, we understand, that's the Korban Pesach. What's the zvachim? It was a Korban Chagiga, a special Korban that was brought as well on the 14th day of Nisan, if you had like a lot of people who would be eating the Korban Pesach, and it wouldn't be clear that everyone would be able to be full. So there's a halacha that the Korban Pesach is supposed to be nechal al hasova. It's supposed to be eaten when people are satiated. So in order to make sure that everybody in the large chabura, the large gathering eating the Korban Pesach would be satiated, so if it was necessary, since there were many people and you wanted to make sure that they would have enough meat to satiate them, they would also bring on the 14th day of Nisan, they would bring a Korban Chagiga as well. However, the Gemara in Pesachim, the Mishnah, in Pesachim and Daf Samach Tes Samad Beis, tells us that this was not a Korban Kavua. This was not a Korban that was brought all the time, that the Torah mandated to be brought. It doesn't have the word B'Moado attached to it. So the Korban Chagiga is not Doches Shabbos. So in a year such as this one, you wouldn't bring the Korban Chagiga on the 14th day of Nisan to eat at the Leil Seder. You would bring other Korbanos. The next day, you would bring for Yantiv. On Pesach, you would bring the Shamei Simcha, you would bring the regular Korban Chagiga that a person brings during the regular Yontif, but therefore you would switch around the order. If the Korban Chagiga would be brought on Erev Pesach, because since the Pesach had to be eaten when you're satiated, the Korban Chagiga would be eaten first. So therefore the order is Min HaZvachim. The Zvachim is Korban Chagiga. And then afterwards, Min HaPsachim, you eat from the Psachim. However, in a year such as this one, in which the Erev Pesach falls down on Shabbos, and you wouldn't bring a Korban Chagiga on Erev Pesach, so you eat from the Korban Pesach first, and then the next day, Yontiv, when you're bringing the Shamei Chagiga and the other Korbanos that can be brought during Pesach itself, you would eat those afterwards. So therefore, the correct nusach should be Min HaPsachim or Min HaZvachim, and that's what that's how the Magen Avraham paskins. That's how the Taz paskins. This is in Siman Tov Ayin Gimel of Hilchos Pesach, that you should switch around the order this year. However, the Mishnah Berurah in the Shar Hatzion there in Sif Katan Pei quotes from the Knesset Gedola, and this is also in the Siddur Hayabitz, who say that you shouldn't switch around the order even during a year like this one, because the nusach of the bracha is we will eat in the future when the Beis Hamikdash is built, so we will eat from the Zvachim Umin Psachim. So that has nothing to do with this year per se. It has to do with next year. So next year we'll have a normal order again, and then it would make sense to eat mina zvachim umina psachim as opposed to changing the order mina psachim mina zvachim. Even if it's a Pesach, which is 1 year before on the official calendar, the following year is going to be an Erev Pesach Shechal Lihiyos BeShabbos. You're hoping again Mashiach will come, and then the way in which the calendar will be established is through the witnesses testifying about the new moon as opposed to the permanent calendar. So you don't know for sure that even the following year is going to be a year in which Erev Pesach will be Chal Lihiyos BeShabbos. And in fact, in the Sefer Halichos Shlomo that records the practices of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, it records he did not change the order of Minha Zvachim or Minha Psachim even during a year such as this. However, the others do switch around the order because it just sensitizes us to the way in which korbanos would or would not be brought based on different types of seasons. So it gets us more in the mode of what the Korban Pesach is all about and the different laws surrounding the Korban Pesach and the Korban Salachos of Shmuel Kamenetsky. For example, he does say that it's appropriate to switch around the order during a year such as this one. So Nara, Pashte, either way, you have sources to rely upon, but that's another difference that occurs this year based on this whole discussion, in the Gemara about what korban is Docha Shabbos and what korban is not Docha Shabbos when you have Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbos. Now, on other types of issues that are more directly relevant, even when the Beis Hamikdash is not standing, is when we do the Bedikas HaChometz. The Mishnah at the beginning of Maseches Pesachim says Bedikas Chometz is normally done the night right before Pesach. The night of the 14th day of Nisan is when we do the Bedikas Chometz. But it requires an ordinary, requires carrying around the candle. But you're not allowed to carry around the candle to be metaltel l'ner on Shabbos. So therefore, we back up we move up the Bedika this year to be on the Thursday night, which is the 13th night of Nisan, as opposed to the 14th night of Nisan. And we make a bracha, even though normally you only make the bracha on the Bedikas Chometz if you're doing it on the 14th night. That's because that's when the mitzvah is, and it's juxtaposed to when you're going to be burning the chometz the next morning. So here, we're going to be burning the chometz not on the morning of the 14th day of Nisan, but on the morning of the 13th day of Nisan. So therefore, on the 13th night of Nisan, the previous night, it already makes sense to make a bracha and to do the bedika. This is also relevant. Some have asked the question, are we going to have two sales this year of the Mechiras Chometz, or are we only going to have one sale with respect to the Mechiras Chometz? Normally, we have two sales because there are people who are going away. They're going to be in Israel. We want to make sure that when we do the sale, it's going to cover them during the time that the chometz is still in their possession and that they have the right to sell the chometz. If I sell the chometz on the morning of the 14th day, and some people are either in Eretz Yisrael or they have chometz in Eretz Yisrael, so even if it's not Yontiv yet, it's too late in the day for them to sell the chometz because the chometz is not considered to be in their possession. It's also b'hana, it's prohibited to receive benefit already from midday on Erev Pesach and midrabanan already from the 6th hour on Erev Pesach. So if I sell the chometz at 9 in the morning, it's way too late for those people who are in Eretz Yisrael. But this year, if I sell the chometz, let's say 8 in the morning on Friday morning, which is the 13th day of Nisan, and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Eretz Yisrael, so the chometz is not going to become prohibited from eating or from benefit until the following morning, until Shabbos, late Shabbos morning. So therefore, really one sale should suffice for everybody, and that's what some have said. Maybe this year, one sale should suffice for everybody, and you don't need to have the earlier sale for those who are either going to be in Eretz Yisrael this year with COVID. I don't know how many people are going to be traveling or able to travel, but people might have chometz that they want to sell that's located in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, this year it shouldn't make a difference. However, the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Tov Lamed Vav mentions another reason why we have an earlier sale in most years, and that is there's a question if a person is going away on Pesach. Even during COVID, a person might go away to children, to parents. A lot of the medical experts say that if it's just sort of a close family unit, two different family units within the same extended family that are going to be together on Pesach, and everybody has been very careful, and particularly if a number of the people have already received their vaccines. So that's something which in many cases you have to consult with your local medical authority, obviously, but in many cases, the medical experts are saying that's something that you would be able to do this Pesach. So some people will be going away. So there's a question, if you're going away, so do you have to check and do a bedikas chametz of your entire house? So the Mishnah Berurah says, well, it's a machlokes. Some authorities say that since the chametz still belongs to you, on the 14th night of Nisan in a normal year, when you're going to be going away, you're only going to be, even if you're selling the chametz, you're only going to be selling it the following morning. So you still have an obligation to check the entire house, even though you're going away. You can't just rely upon the sale of the chametz and the bittul of the chametz. So the Mishnah Berurah says, however, everybody would agree that if you do an early sale in a normal year on the 13th day of Nisan, so then the chametz doesn't belong to you anymore, and then you'd be patur from doing a full-fledged bedika. You check one room just to be yotzei mitzvah bedika, but you don't have to check the entirety of your house. So therefore, a lot of people who do the early sales, not because they're going away to a different time zone, it's because they want to be relieved from the obligation of having to check the chametz in their entire house when they're going to be going away for the entirety of Pesach. So that consideration is still applicable. This year, instead of the obligation of bedikas chametz being on the 14th night, it's on the 13th night. But if you only do your sale of chametz on the 13th day, so when the obligation of bedika has set in, the chametz still completely belongs to you, and then you would have, according to many authorities, an obligation to do a thorough inspection of the entire house. But if you do a sale the previous day, which would be this year Thursday morning on the 12th day of a Nisan, so then you would be excused, according to all opinions, from having to check rigorously and vigorously your entire house. So Rabbi Yosef makes this recommendation. That for people who are going away, even on a year such as this one, they should do an early sale on the 12th day of Nisan on Thursday morning. I spoke to Mordechai Willig Shlita. He also agreed, and he said he's planning to do such a sale. But he said to me, look, if people aren't so makbid for this particular chumrah, either because they're not going away or because they are going away and they're going to check their whole house vigorously anyway, or because they feel comfortable relying upon those shitas quoted by the Mishnah Berurah, that if you're selling the chametz the following morning, then you also don't have to check the entirety of the house, so then it won't be necessary to do the early mechira. So we'll see if people want to do it. So I'm available to do it, but we'll see what happens. It seems to me that at least for those who are going away, it's an eitzah tova. What about when you get rid of the chametz? The bedika is supposed to take place on the 14th, on the 13th night of Nisan, on Thursday night. So when do we say kol chamira v'chamia de'isli the yadati v'chamite? That you do the lashon bittul. So we know we do a lashon bittul of nullification of chametz 2 times. One time during the bedika, that's with respect to chametz that we know about. That we don't know about. Then we do another bittul, even with respect to the chametz that we do know about. The following morning when we burn our chametz. So the second bittul that takes place takes place during the waning moments of when we're allowed to receive benefit from our chametz. But we're allowed to receive benefit and to eat our chametz up until Shabbos morning this year. So there's no reason to do the bittul, especially if we're going to continue to eat chametz over the day on Friday and maybe up until Shabbos morning. We're not going to be mevatel all the chametz that we know about that we're keeping to still eat it. We still want it to be our chametz, so we don't do that bittul on Friday morning, the morning of the 13th. What we do perform on the morning of the 13th is the burning of the chametz, because you can't burn chametz on Shabbos morning. Now, technically, the burning of the chametz could be done, in this case, all day on Friday. There's no reason that normally we make sure to do it before the end of the 5th hour, because afterwards we're not allowed to own chametz anymore. We're going to, be in violation of only chametz after it's midday. So therefore, we make sure to burn the chametz before the time that it becomes asa b'hana, before it becomes prohibited from us to benefit, which is at the end of the 5th hour. But this year really could be all day. But the poskim say that we should still make sure to burn it before the end of the morning, so that we shouldn't confuse the way we do it this year with other years. If we would wait until later in the afternoon, so then next year when it's a regular year, people might think, oh, Erev Pesach, I can wait until the afternoon to get rid of my chametz, and they'll violate the transgression. So therefore, in order to keep everybody in a straight path, we do it the normal time this year. It's a little bit of a question. Can you wait until the beginning of the 6th hour? Do you need to do it during the 5th hour? Normally, we do it during the 5th hour, so you could say the Lashon Bittul afterwards. It only makes sense when the chametz belongs to you, to say the Lashon Bittul, that I am nullifying all of the remaining chametz in my possession, so therefore we make sure to do the burning beforehand, and then we do the Bittul before the end of the 5th hour. This year, some authorities say, and the Medayik based on the Mishnah Berurah, that maybe you can wait until the 6th hour when you're not in any violation, but you don't need to do a lashon bittul, so maybe you can burn the chametz at the beginning of the 6th hour. But the Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, who wrote one of the first collections of essays regarding how to treat an Erev Pesach Shechal BeShabbos situation, says, don't play any games. Do it the way you normally do it every single year. Make sure to burn the chametz before the end of the 5th hour. That'll be by 11:41 a.m. or so on Erev Shabbos on the 13th day. But in terms of the lashon bittul itself, so that you wait until the same time period on Shabbos morning before 11:41 a.m. on Shabbos morning is when you should recite the lashon bittul. With respect to nullifying any chametz that you have in your possession, since you're not going to nullify your chametz until you finish eating it, and you can eat it up until Shabbos morning. This is, of course, the whole big question with respect to how much should you actually be eating chametz on the Shabbos before Pesach, given that you can't burn it? So what are you going to do with any leftover chametz? So we'll get to that in just a moment. The other the time period that gets changed around this year is the Tainis Bechoros. That for Tainis Bechoros, you normally would fast on Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach falls down on Shabbos. We don't fast on Shabbos. So therefore, we have to move it up anyway. Once we're moving it up, we say it's better to move it to Thursday rather than Friday. This was a machlokes amongst the different poskim, but the Shulchan Aruch only quotes two views. One view is we move it to Thursday. We don't want it to be on Friday, so you shouldn't enter Shabbos. So when you're in a state of fasting, for those people who don't make a siyum, everybody makes a siyum. But in case you wouldn't make a siyum, we don't want you to enter Shabbos in a state of fasting. If Erev Pesach really fell out on Friday, so we would have Tainis Bechoros on Friday. But if it falls out on Shabbos, you're moving it back anyway, so therefore move it to Thursday. And the other opinion is, once you have to move it, so don't have it all together. And the Machaber seems to even endorse that opinion. But the Ramah says, no, our practice is that we still have it, but we have it on Thursday rather than Friday, and we make sure to have a siyum on Thursday. But Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, others point out more room for leniencies this year, given the fact that there is this opinion that says that you wouldn't observe it altogether. So we do the siyum, but any question you have about a person's not able to participate physically, they participate via Zoom. So that was a whole big deal last year. Could you be Yotzei Tainis Bechoros by listening to the siyum of Tainis Bechoros by listening to a siyum via Zoom? So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was Makel in a crunch to be Yotzei through telephone for somebody who can't physically be present for the siyum. So this year, for sure, in Erev Pesach Shechal BeShabbos, you can exercise all of these kulos without having to worry too much about it, given that it's even more lenient than regular years. And now, with respect to eating chametz, after the time of the burning of chametz on Friday, so you are still allowed to eat chametz. It's not like a regular Erev Pesach this Friday. On a regular Erev Pesach, You're not supposed to do malacha after chatzos. You're not supposed to take haircuts because it's like a little bit of a yontiv. Based on the fact that in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, this was when people would bring their korban Pesach, and it wasn't right that they would engage in malacha and mundane activities when they're bringing the korban Pesach. We don't bring the korban Pesach on Friday, the 13th day of Nisan. So therefore, the assumption is that all of these activities are permitted for this year. There is another explanation of Rashi that the reason why you wouldn't be allowed to normally do malacha is so that you're busy preparing your matzos and getting rid of your chametz. Okay, so that might still have some relevance this year, but we assume that the main reason for the restrictions is because it's a day of bringing the korban Pesach. This year it's not a day of bringing the korban Pesach, so you could do malacha and you could take haircuts, and even although some say l'chatchila you should take care of all of your kashering by the time that you have the burning of the chametz, but if you didn't, you're even allowed to kasher any kalim that still need to be kashered all day on Erev Shabbos because it's not really Erev Pesach yet, and so too. You're allowed to eat chametz all day. Now, you can and maybe on some level should eat chametz on Shabbos as well, because on Shabbos we know that we have an obligation of having three meals on Shabbos that are supposed to be meals with bread. The Torah indicates that this is, if it's not a din d'oraisa, it's at the very least a din d'Rabbanan. It says ichlu hayom, at least it's at the very least a din, an asmachta, a high level din d'Rabbanan, because it's based on a pasuk ichlu hayom kishabas hayom l'Hashem hayom losim suba sadeh. It says hayom, you have to eat 3 times a meal, 3 times over the course of Shabbos. So you'll say, okay, I don't want to have chametz in my house anymore. I work so hard in getting rid of the chametz, so I'll have another day of Pesach. You can't have another day of Pesach because that would be Baal Tosef. So you'll say, okay, I won't make it a day of Pesach, but I'll eat matzah. I'll have in mind I'm only eating it for the Shabbos meals, but not for Pesach per se. The problem is that there's a Talmud Yerushalmi that says Kol otza matzah be'erev Pesach yilabola usasa b'reis chomiv, that if you eat matzah on Erev Pesach, so it's considered as if it's like a person who impetuously has relations with somebody who's not yet his wife. He was only engaged, or in the olden days they used to be betrothed between at first, and then 12 months later they would only be fully married. But a person's not allowed to have relations with a woman to whom he's only betrothed if there isn't actually nisuin. If there's only erusin, then there isn't nisuin. So it's considered to be a very unsavory type of thing to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. It's an issa d'Rabbanan, and the Yerushalmi says that the person would actually get malchus for this, and malchus mardus, malchus on a d'Rabbanan level. The Rambam codifies this in Hilchos Chametz Matzah, and the Rambam says asu chachamim lecho matzah be'erev Pesach, and if a person does so, makin also makas mardus ashetesi nafsho, that he would get makas mardus. The Rambam adds for good measure until his life it would be extinguished. That we would keep on beating the person up. The Rav Shlomo Warman has an essay about this in his Oros Chag HaPesach. Since when do we become so strict on Malchus Rabbanim that we would beat somebody up until their life force would ebb away from them? So he says that we're just giving them musar, that they shouldn't do it again. So we give them as much Malchus as is necessary until they take upon themselves they're not going to do something like this again. But in any event, we see that this is a very severe prohibition to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. So therefore, you can't eat matzah, but you have to have meals. You have to have a lechem mishnah. There's a question whether the third meal on Shabbos day requires actual lechem mishnah, whether it requires actual bread, or whether you can be yotzei with mine tagima, with fish or with meat, according to some opinions, even with fruit. So the Shulchan Aruch in Simon's Reish Tzadi Aleph in Hilchos Shabbos, to many opinions, not merely mine targima, even for the third meal on Shabbos. So this is a big question, because there are opinions there are opinions that the third meal on Shabbos can only be fulfilled, and the Shulchan Aruch paskins this way. It can only be fulfilled in the afternoon when it's mincha time, 6.5 hours into the day after 12:30 or so. That you can't fulfill it earlier. So in Erev Pesach, you're allowed to eat chometz up until 4 hours into the day. 10 o'clock or so, but you're not allowed to eat chometz afterwards. So even if you're going to set aside some challah rolls, you're not going to be able to fulfill the third meal, only the first 2 meals with the challah rolls. So you have all kinds of different problems with respect to how you're going to fulfill the Shabbos meals properly. Besides the fact that people are nervous about having chometz around. You already burn your chometz that way. How are you going to get rid of this chometz? You'd have to set aside rolls and put them in plastic bags and make sure to eat them very close to your mouth and have and make sure you don't have like a carpet underneath where you're eating, where crumbs can go into the carpet. And then whatever tiny crumbs remain afterwards, you flush down the toilet. You can't burn anything on an Erev Shabbos. On Erev Pesach that falls down on Shabbos, because you're not allowed to do Serefa, you're not allowed to do Havara on Shabbos. It's a malacha, it's a chiyuv nisakares. So you have to, but flushing down the toilet, the poskim say, is permissible. It's a question whether putting in a garbage that's in a container that's owned by the municipality, maybe that's considered also to be removing it from your possession. Different opinions about whether you can do that. That might be okay, especially if you pour on the remaining crumbs some ammonium or something that is going put some soap on it so that it wouldn't be edible anymore. But the best thing is to flush it down your toilet. You put it in crumbs that are small enough so it's not going to clog up your drain. But that is considered to be acceptable. But you leave it. You have to have very circumscribed and carefully, arranged bags so that you keep things very neat. Sometimes with small children, it's a little bit difficult to arrange that. So the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch says the best thing is you have bread meals for at night, and because the Yerushalmi, there's a question. There's the Yerushalmi that prohibits eating matzah the day before Pesach. Does it apply already from the morning? That's how the Ramban assumes. That's how we generally assume. Does it apply even from the previous night? That's a big chumrah. But the Magen Avraham assumes that it applies even from the previous night. So therefore, we don't use the matzah, but we use but the chometz. You can use for a nighttime meal and then early daytime meal. You have to eat very early, so therefore you have early minyanim. This year it's complicated because a lot of the shuls have limitations on the number of people who are allowed to be in shul. So it's hard to have everybody daven so early. But if you're able to go to an early minyan, come home in time that it's not yet the time of the prohibition of eating chametz, so then you can have the second meal that way. And as far as the third meal is concerned, so the Mechaber says no problem, have egg matzah, because Tosfos in the beginning of Arvei Pesachim, for those who are learning Daf Yomi, quotes Rabbeinu Tam that he had no problem eating egg matzah shira, and no problem eating matzah shira on Erev Pesach, because the prohibition of the Yerushalmi only applies to the girl you're going to marry. The matzah you're going to marry, you're going to eat that matzah for the mitzvah of the Seder. So egg matzah, you can't fulfill the mitzvah of the Seder with egg matzah. It's not lechem oni. So therefore, since you can't fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah at the Seder with egg matzah, so you could eat egg matzah for the third meal, even though it's in the afternoon. The problem is that the Ramah seems to say, it's a question if the Ramah really holds this way, but the Ramah seems to say in Siman Tov Samach Beis in Hilchos Pesach that with the Choshesh for the opinion of Rashi, who says that it's egg matzah, matzah made with mei peiros, with fruit juice or egg juice and the like, is a concern of chometz. If not full-fledged chometz, at least chometz nuksha. So therefore, you should not eat it after the time that you're no longer allowed to eat chometz. So you wouldn't then be allowed to have it in the afternoon. So the Ramah himself recommends, relying upon those opinions, that you could be yotzei the third suda with minei tagima, with fruit or fish or meat. So you just don't have anything which is bread in the afternoon of Pesach. You also, even if you normally keep gebrachs, you don't have to keep gebrachs on Erev Pesach. Just that you don't keep gebrachs on the 8th day of Pesach. Kavachom, you don't have to keep gebrachs on Erev Pesach. So you can have even kanedalach. You can have things that are mizonos. You should just have it before the beginning of the 10th hour, because we say that in order to eat your matzah, when you have a zest and a taiva, an appetite for it, you shouldn't eat anything of a mizonos nature after the 10th, beginning of the 10th hour. On Erev Pesach, even the Mechaber would agree that whatever egg matzah you would eat would have to be before that time. Some say, like the Aruch HaShulchan, that the Ramah never intended to be machmir about egg matzah on Erev Pesach. Okay, Pesach, fine. So then he says only Zakenim and Cholim, old people and sick people can be makel about egg matzah on Pesach. But Erev Pesach, he says, the Ramah is also more laid back when he says that the egg matzah is not something that you could eat in the afternoon. He meant that since our practice is not to eat egg matzah on Pesach, you're not going to have egg matzah available. But if you had it available, you could eat even in the early afternoon. I heard from my Rabbi Rav Shechal Shlita that he was prepared to interpret the Ramah in that way and be makel this year. But I spoke to Rav Mordechai Willig, who was a little bit more conservative with a small c, the way that I thought that we would be inclined to be, to say, no. We're concerned about the Vilna Gaon's interpretation of the Ramah, that even on Erev Pesach, he's concerned that we have to treat it like a full-fledged chumetz, that you can't eat it after the 4th hour of the day. So you can have egg matzah for the meal at night. If you don't want to have chumetz altogether, you can have egg matzah for the meal at night and the meal in the morning. In fact, what Moshe Feinstein recommends for people who prefer not to have any chumetz in their house, there's no mitzvah that you have to eat chumetz in Erev Pesach. You can have the egg matzah on Friday night. You can have egg matzah Shabbos morning. It's perfectly okay. It was a whole big controversy that erupted in New York, in the Bronx, in I believe it was 1954, in Tufshin Yud Daled. Regarding this issue, where one rabbi said that let's just have everybody eat egg matzah because people might eat the chametz too late. They might not realize that you're not allowed to burn the chametz on Shabbos. And then there were rabbis who said, how dare you rule differently? The Beis Yosef said that you eat the chalos, and he said, the Beis Yosef said you eat regular bread because we don't want to be matriach people. Lo atarchu rabbanan. We don't want to bother people to have to obtain egg matzahs. If you look at the lashon of the Beis Yosef. But there's nothing wrong about doing it this way. And at that time, the Tufshin Yudal, that's when Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote his tshuva. And there was an editor of a Torah journal, Hamaor, that got all excited and upset about the people who were eating the egg matzah. But Moshe Feinstein said egg matzah is fine. Egg matzah is fine, and you can do it that way if you're nervous about the chumetz. The other thing Rav Moshe didn't speak about, but others suggested, the Mishnah Berurah has this suggestion, is that if you want to have bread for all 3 meals, or the equivalent of bread, egg matzah is the equivalent of bread, you don't have to necessarily have the 3rd meal in the afternoon. There is the opinion of the halachas gedolos that even the 3rd meal can be eaten in the morning. You just have a hefsek, an interruption between the 1st meal and the 2nd meal. You can have the 1st meal at 8:30 in the morning, go to a really early minyan, have it, and then you have a short meal, you take a break, you take a walk, and you learn some Torah, take a half-hour break, the Chazon Ish recommends, and then you have your other meal before it's, 10 o'clock or the last time that you're allowed to eat chumetz on Erev Pesach. I don't have the time in front of me right now. We could look it up. But whatever that time is, so you have the 3rd meal with egg matzah before that time. And then Lihiyos se'es, to be on the safe side, in order to fulfill those opinions who say that Shal Shudas, the 3rd meal, can only be fulfilled in the afternoon, it's fine. So in the afternoon, you'll also have some kanedalach, you'll also have some fish, a little bit of meat, or some fruit, and you'll be yotze according to all the opinions. There is a practice some have here in Chicago, based on Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, Zeichat Tzadik Levacha, that based on a practice that was recommended by the Chai Odom, of having matzah mivushelis, of having not, egg matzah per se, because, okay, egg matzah is a question after the 4th hour, can you have, can you not have, but have a matzah that's just cooked matzah. You take matzah and you put it in, and it was cooked already before Shabbos in hot boiling water. So then matzah mivushelis, you can't fulfill your mitzvah at the Seder with matzah mivushelis, but at the same time, so therefore you're not violating the Yerushalmi, and it's also not chumetz. So therefore you could be yotze according to all opinions. The Magen Avraham said our minhag is not to eat matzah mivushelis Erev Pesach. The Vilna Gaon was medayik in the Rambam, that you shouldn't eat even matzah mebushelas on Erev Pesach. So it's a question whether this is really something that is an accepted minhag across all of Klal Yisrael. The Maggid Avraham says our minhag is not to do it that way, but those who obviously have that tradition from Rav Aaron Soloveitchik have the right to rely upon it. But Rabbi Yosef also was in favor of this idea of the matzah mevushelas. It's not one of the mainstream approaches that's really relied upon. Then, of course, for as far as the Suda Shlishis, the third meal is concerned, there's also the famous opinion of Rabbi Shimon Yochai that's brought in the Zohar, that Rabbi Shimon Yochai, whenever Erev Pesach would fall out on Shabbos, so he would be Yosei Shal Shudis through Divrei Torah. Learn Torah. So maybe partial fulfillment is you have a little bit of fruit and you also review this sugya. So therefore, you review this sugya. So that's a geschmacka way of observing Shalosh Shudis for this particular year. One is not supposed to prepare on Shabbos for Yontiv. So even though it's Erev Pesach, you should have all the preparations, all the food, the charosis, and the zroa, and the romaine lettuce, and everything that needed to be prepared beforehand. The salt water should be prepared, obviously, on Friday before you get to Shabbos. You're not allowed to have any preparations on Shabbos itself. Some of the preparations also could involve, certain like tochen and things, and losh and things of that variety. So therefore, for lots of reasons, you have to make sure everything is prepared before Shabbos, so that you don't have any hachana issues this particular year. One question arises: what about sleep? You want to make sure you stay up for the Seder. Are you allowed to take a nap on Shabbos to prepare, to be up for the Seder on Motzei Shabbos? So the answer is you're allowed to sleep on Shabbos. Shena b'Shabbos Tanug. That's what Shabbos stands for. But you're not supposed to say, I'm now going to be taking a nap so that I can stay awake for the Seder, because that would turn your sleep into a Maaseh Hachana. You say, but I'm allowed to talk about mitzvos. You're allowed to talk about mitzvos on Shabbos, even if it's something pertaining to the week. Yeah, you could talk about it, but you can't do a Maaseh Hachana. If I say, Hareini Muchana Mizuman, I'm now about to lie down to take a nap so I can be up tonight for the Seder, so that's already a Maaseh Hachana that you're not supposed to do. So you just keep your mouth shut. You're taking a sleep. You're taking a nap because it's Shabbos. You'll take the nap after you daven mincha and you said the korban, the Seder korban Pesach, and you had a little bit of a snack before the 10th hour to be yotzei shalosh shudas, and you could take a nice nap. There's a machlokas poskim whether you can eat kitnius on Erev Pesach after the 4th hour. The Pri Megadim was mekel. Chok Yaakov was machmir. Our general approach is to be machmir. A person has mamish nothing else to eat. Rabbi Yashiv held that you could be makel in a crunch, but it creates problems because you don't want to have the pots with kitnius around for Pesach, although there is room to be makel to use a pot that was used for kitnius if it's 24 hours later. We have a tradition that the Gemara tells us that B'Nisan Nigolu u'B'Nisan Asidin Le'Higayim, that we were redeemed from Egypt during the month of Nisan. It's a time of redemption. And Nisan is going to be in the future a time of redemption as well. So we pray with the added Kedusha, in which we're entering into Yontiv this year, to actually launch into a Yontiv from Shabbos at this extra level of Kedusha should propel us to Geula this year, B'Meira V'Yameinu, that we should really be able to fulfill V'Nochal Sham Min HaZvachim and Min HaPsachim.
Rabbi Reiss, thank you so much. I will, for our Kehila, I'll be just providing the Cliff's notes as well based on this, and I'll be sure to run it by you to make sure I'm not doing any injustice. But thank you very much for this most thorough, incredible, informative shiur. I think we all speak for all of us to say that we very much appreciate having you, in this position and leading us in this time, and we thank you for your continued guidance and halachic expertise, and wish everyone here a wonderful day, a Shavua Tov. This Zoom series continues next week, Ymirtz Hashem, with our very own Dr. Malka Simkovich on March 14th, and then the last of the series before Pesach will be Rabbi Moshe Taragin on March 21st. Everyone should have a wonderful day.
Shavua Tov.